All right, guys, it's me again, Christy E. We're here tonight. We're going to talk about abuse in relationships. It is October. It is Domestic Violence Month, and I have here again Miss Kim, and she's going to go in detail with her story, as well as we'll talk about growing up in a house with domestic abuse. And we're just about to have a good conversation. So if you would, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and just enjoy. If this resonates with you, please reach out and get help. We always talk about community. Get in the community, reach out to me, and I can help you find community. So, Kim, how long were you in this relationship?
We were married for 3 years. I actually was with him for a very short period of time. He went to jail, and then when he got back out, I went ahead and jumped right back into a relationship with him. So we got married about 6 months after we started dating, and then we were together for just over a year, and then I kicked him out. The marriage lasted a little longer before the divorce went through, but yeah, I was with him on a daily basis for probably about 2 years total.
Okay. So some people say they get married quick and thrive.
Oh yeah.
So we're not saying that you have to be with somebody a long period of time. We're just saying that she should have waited just a little bit longer because of the separation period before she got married to him.
Mm-hmm.
So we always talk about red flags, right? Women, we always want to know, were there red flags? So Kim, were there red flags? Like, did you see any of this Ike Turner, in him?
Lord. So so initially when we were first together, it was actually that he had a girlfriend I didn't know about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was the side chick, but I didn't know it. I didn't know until he went to jail, actually. So I believe that the cheating itself isn't always a red flag to abuse, the way that we know abuse.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think that the cheating leads to, that's where the emotional abuse comes in, all the psychological abuse comes in. They're ultimately controlling the situation and making it go the way they want it to go. After we did get back together though, there was quite a few things that happened before he ever put his hands on me. One time we were at the club and he got mad at me for something. He actually spit on me that night, and yes, I stayed. I know, but I did. Let's see, one time we were walking on the beach. Actually, we lived in California at the time, and this girl walks by, and he said to me, "That's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen."
Wow.
And
wait, pause. How did that make you feel, though? Like, you're supposed to be the most beautiful woman that you've ever seen, and then he openly says this. Do you feel like he just didn't respect you at all at that moment?
I felt like I stopped and said, I thought to myself, I compared myself to her,
of course,
immediately, and I'm like, oh, she has this flat stomach, and she's wearing this little bikini top and this beautiful flowy skirt, and her hair looks like this. Like, I won't forget what she looked like. I won't forget how that made me feel. But it was a terrible feeling to be in that place, and I recognize that now as the first time that I know that it really started. Like, that was the turning point. It started.
So I want to say this, because we're talking about side chicks, being with other women, husbands and boyfriends, and knowing it. What we don't realize is, like Kim just said, we are comparing ourselves to the other woman. We're in competition with the other woman, and we don't even know it. Right. You may have never seen her, but just the fact that this man is with somebody else, you're in competition. You're trying to do things to please him, but then he's controlling the situation. Mm-hmm. So that is a form of abuse. Control in any factor is a form of abuse, because even God gives us free will.
Right. So go ahead. Yeah, I think that anytime a man makes you question who, or anybody you're in a romantic relationship with,
Who
I should
you
say,
are.
even your family, if they make you question your value and any part of your worth, any part of the way God created you to be, I think that essentially that comes back to the same idea. It's all abuse. It's
Right.
all unacceptable.
Right.
You should never be questioning who you are, who God created you to be at
Right.
all. You
Right.
know what the word says.
Right.
We know. We
That
know
is
who we
true.
are. We know who we are in
We
Christ.
know. So you said it was about 6 months before he started to actually. Could you recall the first time he hit you?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that happened actually before he put his hands on me, was the night at the club. So essentially, the day at the beach was the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then came the night at the club when he spit on me, and later on that night he also raped me. But because we're in a relationship, I didn't recognize it at the time as what was happening.
Right.
Then after that, there was another time where I knew he was going to put his hands on me, but he didn't. I had answered a question. One of the neighbors asked a question. I answered the question because I knew he didn't know and he was taking a long time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I answered it. He followed me back into our apartment and basically got in my face and said I emasculated him and all of this in so many words. He wasn't that smart to use that word. But anyways, he basically told me that I shouldn't have answered, to overstep my bounds by answering the question. And I remember feeling afraid. But he didn't put his hands on me. There was a lot of psychological things that led up to the first time he put his hands on me.
Right.
He didn't put his hands on me for it probably took about, I want to say, like 4 months before the first time he actually physically touched me, and that's
Right.
he put me in the hospital the first time.
Right. So, in other words, he made you feel this small.
Yes.
He made you feel like you wasn't worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wanted you,
Yep.
and he was your God.
And I was never ever good enough.
Right.
Everything I did was wrong.
Because that's usually how it happens. Even when you talk about abuse from a parent to child,
Mm-hmm.
or sibling to sibling, it's always made to feel like nobody wants you. You're always going to be this way.
Right.
So it was that traumatic that he put you in the hospital.
Yes.
What was that like? I don't even know how to ask her this question.
Go for it.
Like, what was that like?
It was, so I'll tell you what happened. So I was in a rental car. He had totaled my car. And then he totaled my car and then he proceeded to get it impounded. He went far out to his mom's house and I had to drive to come pick him up. I had my friend in my car with me. We were actually supposed to go get our nails done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to drop everything to go pick him up at his mom's house, completely out of the way. So when I get there, he was like, well, let me drive. Now, this man did not have a driver's license. And considering that he had just totaled my car, I said, you're not totaling the rental car. So when I wouldn't let him drive, he was, very upset. So I'm fine, stay at your mom's house. I was trying to take power back, but I had my friend in the car and I was embarrassed and I didn't want her to know what was going on. She knew, but I didn't want her to see it.
Right.
The way that he was mentally just abusive towards me. So I started driving off. He actually ran up. I was driving up to a corner to make a left turn. He ran up on the corner and I had the windows down. I slowed down. I was he started to pull a gun out of his waistband. I stopped and I said, what, are you gonna shoot me? And this man instead ran up to the window and hit me in the head with the gun through the window. And I just remember sitting there and my ears were ringing. I couldn't talk. I was thinking, but I couldn't say anything. And my friend is like, did he just hit you? And I'm like, I can't nod my head.
You're in shock.
Everything is just slow motion, and everything's kind of getting fuzzy, and I'm in the midst of driving on top of this, so I had to focus enough to look down and hit the brakes, and then that's the last thing I remembered until they were putting me in the ambulance. Wow. And I remember him standing out there, and I couldn't talk. He didn't know I couldn't talk, but he was like, what's your mom's number? I'm gonna call your mom. And I'm like, I can't say anything. Mm-hmm. And the way that he had abused me at that point, I was more worried about because I couldn't talk and he didn't know I couldn't talk, I was more worried that he was gonna think that I was ignoring him versus, you know, ultimately what was happening, or the fact that I would want to tell him what my mom's phone number is so he could call my mom and tell my mom to come be with me. So that's what I was more scared of. And when I got to the hospital and they took me to UCLA Medical Center, which is a teaching school. So you're like in a big room and they looking over the side at you, over the little wall. It was just, it was embarrassing. But the police came to me and started asking me questions, and all I could think was, I need to cover for him. Like, I need to prove to him that I've got his back. And so I was like, oh, some homeless man hit me. And they were like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, you know, I'm sure. They knew everybody knew what was going on. And even to my mom, to my family, everybody, I lied for him.
So was that love? I mean, did you think you loved him that much that his well-being was greater than yours?
I think I thought I did. I thought I did. But that's not love. That's not love. Like you know when you need to put yourself, like my child, I'm gonna put myself ahead of her. Somebody's shooting, I'm jumping. Right. But to say, you physically assaulted me, you could have killed me, and I'm still gonna stand up and I'm not Jesus, look, I'm not taking your punishment for you. But I thought that I was doing the right thing at the time, and more so than that, I wanted him to accept me. I wanted him to say, you know, well done. I know this, but I'm waiting for the Lord to say this. The Lord's going to
say, well done.
But I wanted him to say it. I wanted him to be like, oh, wow, I appreciate what you did for me. Because I'd been not enough for so long. Like, every single day, I'm hearing how horrible I am. So I just wanted him to accept me and approve of me. I wanted to hear that from him. So, yeah.
That story is just, it's so familiar to all of us, whether it's in a domestic violence, you know, way, or even if it's in a marriage where there's no domestic violence, but it's mental, you know, and emotional. A child to a parent, like this story can be so familiar in any aspect of our lives. But what we have to understand is, you matter. You are enough. It doesn't matter if somebody else can't see it. You have to know that you were created in the image of Christ. You were chosen, you were adopted, you were set apart, you know, and you have to believe that. Like, period, you have to believe it, you have to stand on it, because God is able to deliver you out of that situation. And as you see Kim sitting here now, with so much of grace and so much of love and so much of confidence, and beautiful as she is, because she overcame, and she could share her story, you know, with me. She could share her story with you, and she's happy to do it with anyone, because sometimes we go through trials so we can help the next person. And when we going through it, don't feel good, but when we come out and we're empowered and we can help the next person, that's what I did it for. So, next question. Your mom, your family had to come to the hospital. What was because moms always know.
Yeah.
When you're young, your mom be like, I always know. You be like, no, you don't. But moms always know, okay?
Yes.
So how was it? How was that conversation?
I stuck to my story. I really did. My mom knew better. She definitely
did. You ever think what a homeless man doing with a gun?
You know what? I'm telling you though, we were in LA downtown on Skid Row, so I was like, you know what? It's gonna blend in this place.
Gonna blend in.
But my mom, she knew. But my mom knew before anything happened. She knew. I will never forget. She brought us to dinner, me and him, and had this conversation about. She said, "This is my baby cub. I'm Mama Bear. Don't play with my baby cub." Yeah. She knew. Even just at that point, just how protective that she was of me, I knew that she just felt something was off with him. And then after all this happened, my mom was the most supportive person. I mean, I had follow-up doctor's appointments. I was out of work for a couple months because my after this, my attention span was just off. I couldn't work for a couple months. I mean, my family was overall supportive, but they never pressured me to go into detail about what really happened. Like, I knew that they knew. And even now, I can talk to them, and they're like completely not surprised by anything that I tell them. But it is amazing to look back and realize that I had all of this surrounding me, because he had kept me so isolated. And even after this happened, I went back with him. This all happened before I got married. We got married a couple months later. Yes. So, yes, and that was a whole other.
Okay.
Anyways,
so first you said a word, isolation.
Mm-hmm.
So, I remember when I was married, first time I got married. One thing that happened was I was always with his family and his friends. And my mom used to be like, oh, why don't you come over here, da-da-da things. And, I didn't know. I thought, he played in church. I thought we was just going to church. Church is a good thing,
Right.
whatever. But it was an isolation factor.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a abuse in our relationship. And it would be to the point of we'll be sitting in the movies and he'll have his hand, on my side or something hurting me, and I can't say anything because,
right.
we're in church, things like that. And it's the little things you have to pay attention to.
Yes.
You have to pay attention to. I never paid attention to it. I never should have got married. I think I was just more infatuated because we go through areas in our life where we think we're not enough. And he used to always come up to me and say, I'm going to be your husband. I'm going to be your husband. Mm-hmm. I was naive. It was just that easy. Okay.
Right.
Type thing. But it's because somewhere along, in the childhood, you feel like you're not enough. Just somewhere in that upbringing, sometimes we don't want to admit it. We don't want to let out family secrets. But somewhere along the line, it was a break where you thought that you were not enough, and we found ourselves in this situation. But isolation is the devil.
Yes.
It's almost like don't quote me, but it's like the number one sign that this relationship may go south.
Right.
And if it goes south, I done stopped talking to my mom. I hadn't been to a family reunion. I done moved 16 hours away.
Yeah.
And you're by yourself. So who is your support system? Who is your community? So be careful when it comes to isolation in a relationship, because you should always have community. You should almost immediately introduce him to your best friend.
Yes.
Almost be like, oh, let's go have dinner with my best friend.
Right.
So that's something I learned in my later life. But we think it's cute when we're younger that it's just me and you, type thing, that song.
Yes.
But go back to talking about the isolation. How did that look?
So I'd always felt alone. So that was me, and that was part of my struggle that caused me to even get with him in the first place. But I did have friends around who they loved me, and they weren't part of my daily life. We were friends, but we weren't doing life together.
Right.
And then so what happened is after first when he first spit on me, one of my friends was there, and she stopped talking to me after that. She said, I can't watch you go through this.
Oh, wow.
So we just disconnected. I had another friend who came and visited me in the hospital, and she told me, Kim, like, are you taking him back? And I was like, well, we're together, we live together, and all this stuff. And she said the same thing. I cannot watch you go through this. And so she backed away. Several of my friends backed away as a result of all of this, but his friends, so the girl that was with me the day he put me in the hospital was his friend's girlfriend. And so her and I had bonded, and so I called her from the hospital, and we're chatting and all this, and I was asking her what happened after we left, and she was like, he was just fine. Like, he was a little worried that you were going to turn him in, but he was fine. But I remember that her loyalty was with him, because that was her man's friend, and she ended up putting me on the phone with her boyfriend, who was, he was checking on me, and he told me, he said, this separate of isolation, I guess, but I will never forget, he told me that, he said, Kim, you had your whole life together before you got with this man. Why are you dealing with him? And I was like, I love him. And then I proceeded to tell, whenever I got out of the hospital and we reunited, I told my ex-husband, I said, this is what your friend did. I was like, that's not loyalty. I'm hearing all my friends are backing away, and I'm thinking, oh, they're not being loyal to me as a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and they want me to choose. And now your friend is saying this bad stuff about you. And he said, no, he's right. I'll never forget that. But anyway, so a couple months after he put me in the hospital, when I was getting ready to transition back to work, I decided that I wanted to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I went ahead and requested a transfer, moved to Texas.
Okay.
When I got to Texas, I found out I was pregnant. And so then I decided, oh, well, now we have to get married. So that's where the marriage came from. So whenever he got here, I didn't really have anybody. My cousin lived out here, but my cousin lived in Plano, and I'm all the way in Fort Worth. So I didn't have anybody nearby. I wasn't making friends at work the same way that I wanted to. I didn't have any kind of church family. He was very anti-church, so we never went to church.
So let's talk about anti-church
Yes.
and church. This is a big thing. So like my pastor say, I'm not telling y'all not to date people that don't go to church. But it's the anti-church. It's the ones that won't go to church, that is totally against what you're believing. So how did you think that would work?
Well, people tell you now, they'll be like, oh, I don't go to church, but I'm spiritual. So I decided I was going to be one of those people. I don't go to church, but I'm spiritual. He didn't want to go to church because churches, they all just want your money. So he didn't have no money. I don't know why I didn't think about this. Like, you didn't have any money for them to take in the first place, so you weren't losing. But I decided I'm gonna be spiritual. Well, like, the reality is, you can say I'm spiritual. I don't go to church. But the reality is, 9 times out of 10, you're also not reading your word. You only crying out to God when you need something.
Right.
And that's where I found myself. I knew God. I had that foundation. I grew up in church.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just that, he said we're not going, and so I was, I'm submissive. Somehow I'm leaving the whole Bible alone, but I'm keeping up with being submissive.
Isn't it crazy? We submit to the wrong things.
Oh my
We submit to the wrong things, but I want to just take a moment to just talk about how good God is. Because even when we put him to the side, he is still right there for us. That's how great the God that we serve is. He loves us unconditionally. We make our mistakes. We're like, okay, God, this man is more important, or this woman is more important, and I'm coming back, Lord, and he's right there to accept us. Yes. So I'm so glad that God is not like man. That's one thing that we all should be lucky of. But I just wanted to let y'all know how good the God that we serve is.
Yes.
So you're not going to church. So at what point enough was enough?
Oh, he took me through a lot. So just to kind of recap, so I lost the first baby. We still proceeded to get married. I was going through all that, and it was a mess. I ended up pregnant again. I had my daughter. Just to kind of highlight on how amazing God is, I'm gonna tell y'all real fast. This man, early in my pregnancy, and I'd already lost one, so I'm being extra careful.
Right.
But early in my pregnancy, he thought I said something to one of the neighbor girls about him, and so he proceeded to strangle me and throw me on the ground and all this. And he said, if you are lying to me about talking about me, that baby's not gonna live. Now let me tell you something. My baby turns 13 on Monday, so look, God had a whole other plan.
Oh no.
But so we went through. My whole pregnancy, he would strangle me, or he would push me around. He hit me. I was going to work with fat lips and a big belly. And then it was a lot of financial abuse. He was not working consistently, but he would take, if he did work, he would take his entire paycheck and go blow it on whatever he felt like.
Right.
I had no clothes that fit me throughout my whole pregnancy because he would take all my money and go do whatever he felt like with it. He would go back to California on the Greyhound bus all the time. He'd clear out my bank account. A few times he did that. So it was just nonstop that entire time. Well, after my daughter was born, he kind of backed off a little bit, but he refused to help with her. He absolutely would not get up in the middle of the night with her or anything like that. Somehow he thought he had a job in the morning to do, so he couldn't get up. But what happened was he was driving my car around, and this is really just God orchestrating things. He was driving my car around through our parking lot at the apartments we lived in, and people would complain about how loud he had the bass up and how fast he was going. So what happened was my management company told me that if he stays, then they won't renew my lease. They said he had to go and I could stay.
Right.
Well, I'm like, I'm not getting rid of my husband. I'm doing all this stuff. But so my grandparents live in Colorado and had a whole basement apartment free for us. So they were like, you guys can come stay here. We'll help with the baby and all this stuff. So we proceeded.
Did they know how he was treating you?
They had an idea.
Okay.
But I think they felt that their presence would keep stuff from happening. Right. Now, it did to an extent, but he transferred it. So he was still horribly financially abusive. He would call me all day at work. He had all kind of other females around. It was just nonstop. Yeah. The entire time. And one time he did try to put his hands on me, but he didn't know my grandparents were outside, and so they couldn't hear me scream.
Okay.
Or he didn't know they couldn't hear me scream, so he let me go.
Okay.
So he didn't have to deal with that. But he started getting pornography. He was taking ecstasy and just he was a mess. He started doing everything. And then taking my car and being out all night. So this was the epitome of emotional, mental, psychological abuse. It was just the worst time I had ever experienced. Right. And then one night he took my car. He told me his phone was dying, turned off his phone. He ended up getting pulled over. He had given a fake name and a fake social to one of his friends, and so they called me and were like, hey, we have this guy driving your car, and they gave me a name, and I knew who the name was, and I was like, yeah, I don't want him getting arrested. I need my car. I don't want to get it impounded and all this stuff. So I covered for him again with the police, again. And then I expected, because I did this, that this time he's going to call me. He's going to turn his phone back on and call me. Of course he didn't. So I'm literally up all night knowing I have to work the next day. And he just never came home. So what happened was a Sunday. My grandparents left for church. I grabbed my baby and put them in their other car and started driving around looking for him. And I found him at a park with some guy in my car and two girls in the back seat. His shirt was inside out, the girls' makeup smeared, like they'd been up all night, guaranteed. I don't know what they were doing, but they were definitely up all night. I will never, it takes a lot to make me mad. I walked over to that car, I put my hand in the window, smacked him upside his head. I don't condone violence. Oh, but the statute of limitations is up, so I can tell y'all. So I smacked him in the head, and that was it. I called the police, and I started telling them everything. I said, first of all, that he's in my car. I'm gonna report it stolen. We don't have anything to do with that, because it's a domestic situation. But I ended up going straight to the police station, and I told them everything. I told them that whenever he had moved to Texas, he had skipped out on his parole in California. He had warrants out there. I told him all the aliases he was using for his friends. I just was like a faucet. I just said, this is everything that's going on. And so I actually called my grandparents and told them what was going on too, because they were at church. It's your house, I want to let you know. The police said, stay at church, go ahead and do your worship. They went home instead. It was I'm thankful that they did now, because he was loading up everything in my car and about to leave. And my grandpa went and let the air out of one of the tires, so he couldn't leave. But the police ended up coming, they arrested him and took him into custody, and then he was extradited back to California, and I had to begin the healing process.
So, but you don't understand what you said. And I'm writing about this in my new book. Until she admitted where she was. You see what?
Yes.
All this time she's covering up until she admitted, this is where I'm at in my life. She could not get any help, and the healing process would not begin until she said, this is where I'm at. That's something that we don't understand what we do. We wear these masks, and we don't want people to know where we at, but we have to say, look, I'm jacked up. Look, this is what I'm going through. Like, somebody please help me, type thing. So that's so profound. You didn't even know what you said, and I was like, dang, I just wrote about that in my chapter called Healing. But that's what we have to do. We have to say, this is where I'm at. Because you're never going to get out of it if you don't admit you're there.
Right.
Because if you don't admit you're there, you don't know you're there.
Right.
So I'm just so happy you said that. Because the world needed to know that we need to admit, and don't be ashamed of it. Because then she got the help she wanted. She got her family on her side.
Yes.
She were able to get him out of her life and start to heal and sit here and help, us today with this.
Right.
So what would you have to say to the ladies that think this is love?
Love absolutely does not hurt like this. It shouldn't. You should always be at your best in your relationship. You should be with somebody who's loving you and supporting you, lifting you up, and speaking life to you as well. Like, I know, as women, we're told, oh, you be his peace and be all this for him, and support him and love him. But he should be doing that back to you too. Yeah. It doesn't have to hurt. You don't have to constantly be in struggle with him, especially if he's the reason for it. And you just have to get to the point where you're willing, just like you said, where you're willing to admit that I wouldn't be struggling if it wasn't for him. I wouldn't be in this place if it wasn't for him. And then realizing that he's not love, he is hindering you, he's using you, he's hurting you. He's hurting your financial situation. He's hurting you physically. He's hurting you mentally and emotionally. And, just realizing that and, again, admitting it is going to be one of the biggest steps that needs to happen in order to get out of that. But you have to know that you deserve more. God created you to be so much more than what he's trying to challenge you to be, so to speak. It's not even a challenge. He's just telling you you're not good enough. Most of the time is where they're leading to, but it doesn't hurt. Love does not hurt. You may experience some hurt in a good, loving relationship, but it's not that kind of hurt. It's not that kind of hurt.
It's not the black eyes and the busted lips and you going home and you're crying every night.
It's not fear.
That's not what it's called.
It's not. Yeah, you have support with each other. You have love with each other. Yeah. Like, it's a good, loving relationship isn't without its problems. Because I know that's something I thought it was just, we just had problems. Right. I thought that, I watched my mom. My mom was in an abusive relationship, not that I saw, but I watched her, sometimes, she'd be mad at my stepdad, or she'd, so there's real relationship issues that happen, yes, but do they always lead to a fist? No. Do they lead to, again, clearing out,
neglect, insecurity,
all that, clearing out your bank account? No, not at all.
Yeah. So once again, if you're in this type of relationship, reach out, get help. Admit where you are. You can't make excuses for the person that hurt you. But I do want to flip it. And we don't have a guy sitting here today, and it's rare that guys come up and say, they are being abused. But I have a grandson now. So, women, we can't do these things to men and think it's okay. We watched the movie Baby Boy with Taraji, how she hit Tyrese, and then reaction, he turns around and hit her. we can't treat somebody like we don't want to be treated. So you just have to keep your hands to yourself and don't belittle anybody because of your insecurities. Don't lash out at anyone because of your insecurities and things like that. Have a healthy, loving, communicative relationship. And I just wanted to bring that out because it is the flip side. Men are in abusive relationships, and they are our sons, our brothers, our grandkids, our fathers. So we have to love on them, just as well, and tell them to reach out to somebody and get help, so that they can get out of their relationships. So I think we're going to have a part 2. Because we probably just did the icing on the cake today. But we're going to come back with a part 2 of this because we want to talk about growing up in a house with domestic violence, how that make you view life, how that makes you have relationships, and how you react to people. And we want to talk about, what else, Kim, did we leave out today?
Oh, one thing that I would say is, if you know somebody going through a domestic violence relationship or situation, just don't leave them behind. Right. Don't just say, oh, she's staying, this is her choice, and she's done for that or whatever. It's so much. When I tell you it started psychological, it's like, I promise you, I describe it now as being brainwashed.
But let me ask you this, and we're really going to close. But do you not think it's psychologically and emotionally on that friend as well? That you're always crying wolf, but you'll never leave?
There's a lot to that too. Yeah. There definitely
Okay,
is.
So we're going to stop right there. We're going to leave y'all hungry, but we're going to come back again, and we're going to talk about the latter part of this video. Peace. Y'all have a good night.